Today on Behind the Label, a conversation with fashion legend Kenneth Cole. Hear the incredible story behind the launch of his company. Find out about his controversial print ads and their double meaning. And discover what shoe craze was started by his father. Fashion. Yes, it does change and is oh so unpredictable. But New York designer Kenneth Cole has managed to predict what people will want for more than 20 years now. He's been the head of a successful company since 1982 and has elevated it to one of today's mega brands. It includes everything from those famous shoes to a wide range of accessories, urban, contemporary men's and women's clothing, to fragrances and colognes. With a boyish charm to match his handsome good looks, Cole is himself a favorite with fashionistas everywhere. Your father was in the shoe business, and when you were growing up, you actually used to go to the factory with him.
Yeah, I did. I did that, but even before that, I always kind of found a way to marry my passion, my practical and my emotional and my kind of personal needs and my kind of financial goals together whenever I could. And at a very young age, people said to me, what did you want to be when you were younger? Did you always want to be a designer? And I said, no, but I was so clear. I knew what I wanted to be when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. And it was shortstop for the Mets. And I was going to get there, and I was very clear. And it became very apparent at a certain point that wasn't likely to happen. But my first real job was selling peanuts at Shea Stadium. And I was selling peanuts, and I was running up and down the aisles, and I saw all the games I wanted to see. And then a year later, it was the Knicks and the Rangers at Madison Square Garden.
Professional ball player wasn't quite in the cards for Kenneth Cole. He was destined for something else. And that journey began the day Kenneth Cole went to work with his father.
My father had an associate who was kind of running his design, merchandising and sales, and who kind of really knew, which to me and to us was kind of the pulse of the business. And he was leaving to go into competition, a guy named Bernie. And I figured it would be a good time for me to take a leave from my education, spend that summer just before I went out to law school and really learn the business. And if for no other reason, then I just knew it. I had little interest in wanting to be in the women's shoe business up at that time, the least masculine, the least appealing thing I could ever have seen a guy like myself doing. But I fell so in love with the business so quickly.
You were seduced.
I was seduced.
When you worked with your father, Candies was really a popular brand.
We started Candies about a year later. We worked in a shoe factory, very confining. It was a four walls factory in Brooklyn, not the best place to work, and limited by how fast the conveyor worked and how many shoes we could make a day, how much leather was delivered, how many people showed up. And then we decided one day to start importing, and it started with a group of shoes called Candies. And people say that we conceivably crippled half a generation of Americans.
I was one of them.
And then a few years after that, I needed to do something more personal.
Here you were, your dad's got this successful business, you were part of it. What was pivotal in making you decide to leave?
I just believed that I needed to do this, and that if I didn't do it then, I never would, and life only gets more complicated.
Being the son of a successful father can be a lot of weight on any kid. Is that what made you decide to leave?
I don't know, maybe. I think that at a certain point, I was very driven, and early on, it was clear we didn't always see things the same way. And unquestionably, it was my role to yield, but it became harder and harder to keep yielding. So I felt that, you know what, it's incumbent upon me. If I can no longer do it this way, then I've got to do it somewhere else, and it'd be wrong for me to expect him to, or even ask him to. So, and I should try it and see. Maybe I'm delusive. Maybe it's just not. It can't happen this way.
You've got 3 terrific kids. Would you want them to go into business with you?
I don't know, Judy. I'd want them to just kind of be their own people. And if they get there, I want them to get there on their own. And I want them to want it and to love it. And you know, it's hard with kids because you kind of want to hold them tight, you want to guide them, but you don't want to smother them. And you know, what's that metaphor about like a bird? You want to hold just tight enough so that you can nurture it, not too tight that
It can't fly on its
it
own.
can't fly on its own. So, and that's the challenge. And how do you give them the tools and the strength to be as all they can be?
You know, the story about how you started in this business is by now legend.
When I started the business, I had a little bit of time to get into business. I didn't have a lot because I knew then, not much different today, that most startup businesses, I think the statistic is 60, 70, I think at that time it was even more, startup businesses don't survive 1 year because people almost always underestimate their costs, their need for capital, and or underestimate the time it's going to take to get money coming in, cash flow. So I knew I had to move quickly, and it was September 1982. I wanted to be in business by December in a trade show. So I needed a name for the business because I had to make business cards, I had to make stationery, I had to apply for a trade show, I had to start some formal level of communication with prospective associates, so I needed a name, and I couldn't take the chance of creating a name, filing in Albany, filing in Washington, finding out months later from trademark offices that there was a conflict. So I went with my own name, Kenneth Cole. It made my mother happy, it was easy, and I knew you can almost always get your own name registered. Then I got on a plane to Italy knowing I had a better chance of getting credit from an Italian shoe factory that needed business than from an American bank that didn't. And I designed a line of ladies' shoes, kind of very cool, very different. And at the time in the shoe business in the States, you had 2 choices. You could either, if you had a brand, you could either take a room at the Hilton Hotel and you'd be one of about 1,000 companies. The other choice was to take a big fancy showroom within a 2-block radius of the Hilton Hotel. Clearly, I didn't have the time or the money for option B. So, but I knew I needed to get the buyers. I had this kind of crazy thought, and I called a friend of mine in the trucking business, and I said, you know what, if I can figure out how to park one of your 40-foot trailers across the street from the Hilton Hotel, will you lend it to me? And he said, sure, jerk, because this is New York. You can't park a bicycle here for 3 minutes, let alone a truck for 3 days. Thank you very much. I called the mayor's office an hour later. And it was Mayor Koch at the time, and I said, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, it wasn't actually the mayor. And I said, how does one get permission to park a 40-foot trailer on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street? And the answer was, son, they don't. This is New York. We give permission only under 2 circumstances. A is if you are a utility company servicing our streets, AT&T, Con Ed, or if you are a production company shooting a full-length motion picture, because in the early 80s, we were going through an I Love New York campaign. So I said, thank you, Mr. Mayor, hung up the phone, and then later that day went to a stationery store, changed the name of my company from Kenneth Cole Inc. to Kenneth Cole Productions Inc. And I filed for a permit the following day for permission to shoot a full-length motion picture called The Birth of a Shoe Company. We opened for business on December 2nd with 2 New York policemen as our doormen, compliments of Mayor Koch. I had a director. Sometimes it was filming his camera, sometimes it wasn't. And we had stanchions. Every buyer stopped, and the longer we made them wait, the more they bought when we let them in. And we sold 40,000 pair of shoes in 3 days.
You know, that is one of my favorite stories about marketing, about fashion, about, well, just sheer know-how.
Well, but I tell thank you. I tell that story though, and we still tell it. The company is still Kenneth Cole Productions Inc. It's traded on the New York Stock Exchange, symbol is KCP. And we tell the story, we kept the name because it continues to remind everybody here the importance of resourcefulness and problem solving, and that the best solution is rarely the most expensive, it's almost always the most creative. And that is the foundation that we've built our business, and not just what we sell, but how we sell it, and how we conduct the process of doing business.
And I think that philosophy, the same philosophy that you started with the Kenneth Cole Productions, the fake film company, if you will, we're still waiting for the movie, although we now get the movie at the beginning of every fashion show. And obviously you must have felt guilty. Now you feel like you have to deliver the movies.
We have a production every 6 months, and we bring it to our friends back home.
Up next, Kenneth Cole's edgy print ads, and find out which one he pulled at the last minute. For Kenneth Cole, a successful company is about so much more than the bottom line. This designer feels obligated to take on social issues, and he's carved out a niche as a social activist using advertisements that are cutting edge. They're controversial, sometimes irreverent, and always recognizable. I know it's important for you to get across your message, which you have by now made famous. What you stand for is more important than what you stand in.
That's been basically the kind of the mission and/or / culture of the company as it has evolved in this process. It started in 1985. I was trying to figure a way to figure out how to make what we did more important than it was by itself. And I looked around, and I had a very small advertising budget in '85.
And your company was only 2 years old at the time. Most people can't even afford to advertise at that point.
I had a couple $100,000, which is minuscule in the world of advertising, but it was a fortune to me at the time. So, and what we do in fashion business, we essentially put ourselves in our customers' shoes. So where are we collectively, emotionally, individually, and collectively, and what is consuming us? And in 1985, there was this pervasive consciousness that swept this country. Within 6 to 9 months period, it was Live Aid, We Are the World, Hands Across America, Farm Aid. There was all these initiatives, all of whom which were very valid, and most of which were about hunger in Ethiopia. And that just totally astounded me, because if we could be so mobilized about something so far away, not unimportant, but so far away, I was just thinking then and today how much we could do if it's something that was potentially going to truly devastate our lives, or truly touch all our lives, if not, in fact, totally change them.
And so you did that wonderful AIDS campaign.
It was AIDS. And AIDS, interestingly enough, we knew how to cure it then, but we didn't know how to contain it. Unlike SARS, unlike tuberculosis, unlike all these other diseases that totally elude us because we don't know how they're transmitted. We knew at the very beginning how it was, but yet nobody could talk about it. No public people, in fact, Reagan went through his entire presidency, never mentioned the word AIDS. You couldn't say it publicly. And nobody in our industry could say it, because if you said it, you were assumed to be gay.
And back then, it was horrific.
It was terrible. So you couldn't, or maybe promiscuous, not as bad, but also bad, and maybe an IV drug user. But I wasn't, but I didn't care, and I said to myself, what an amazing opportunity. We can say something. So I set out on this campaign to talk about AIDS. Then I did a campaign with Annie Leibovitz. That was the first initiative which brought together all these supermodels at the time.
So you had $100,000 in your pocket, which is nothing in advertising. And maybe it buys you a page in the Times, if a page in Vogue, but you got the top people on board. Annie Leibovitz shot the campaign, Christy Brinkley modeled in it.
It was great for the issue. It was great business decision at the time. It became a very personal decision immediately thereafter. And it became something that just consumed us, and has since. Ever since then, this has been our journey, and it's been exhilarating.
You started to do things about gun control, capital punishment,
every
all
sensitive
of the social...
issue, I didn't miss any.
Yeah.
Every issue I was told not to touch. Choice, don't talk about choice. Ken, please don't talk about choice, it's terrible. So, but the ad didn't. The ad initially didn't anyway. It said, women should have the right to be pregnant, barefoot's another story.
The shoe company is very good.
A lot of thought. We were very clear on one issue.
Yeah.
I thought we were vague on the other, but some people felt otherwise. And then another one years ago was a photograph. There was all this talk, public debate in the early 90s about automatic weapons. Should they be legal, should they not? Now, in my mind, there isn't a rational case anywhere for the existence of an automatic weapon in civilized society. They are meant to kill as many people as possible in a shorter period of time. You press your thumb and the trigger, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition come out. You can't hunt with it, you can't defend your kids with it, you can't do anything with it but get into trouble. So I run an ad at the time, very incensed. Obviously, and the ad says, we neither condone the right to bear arms or bare feet. A lot of thought, and say, you know what, as much as appropriate as this issue is, I'm not going to be blatant on my position here, except how I feel about the foot thing, the shoe thing, that was okay. And we were bombarded by all this feedback.
Translating ideas into words doesn't always come easily. And though the message comes straight from Kenneth Cole's heart, the ads themselves are more of a collaborative effort.
It's very collaborative. It's a big group in here. Early on, at the very beginning, I had an advertising agency, Kirschman & Bond, that I worked with at the very beginning. In the last 10 so years, we do it in here. We have a creative team, and we deliberate, and we get frustrated, and we essentially focus on the issues that I'm most passionate about, and we collectively figure out how we're going to talk about them. We had an ad recently, about 9 months ago, I'm trying to get the timing here, against the war in Iraq, and I was told you can't do it. And then we have kind of stuck to our guns, and we've kind of stayed on that path, and we had the ad done, and we had it printed, and it was ready to go up on the West Side Highway and billboards across the country, and it said, just what this country needs is a new war, and then in small letters, drobe, wardrobe. And kind of a soft, not so subtle suggestion that we don't go to war and that you come to our stores and buy clothes. And then we said, you know what, regardless of how I feel, this is a time that the country needs to be united, and this is not the time for that debate. So we pulled the ad. We didn't run it.
Have there ever been times where you thought you'd crossed the line?
There was a few other messages that created maybe more controversy than we had anticipated. One was right after 9/11. And if you sign on to the fact that what we do is a reflection of us collectively, the emotional being, it's not just what we look like on the outside, but who we are on the inside. And you want to relate to that and you want to touch that. 2 months after 9/11, October, November, there was nothing on any of our minds except our security, our well-being, and the devastation that happened to those 3,000 or so families in the World Trade Center. So how do you talk about anything else without appearing to be trite and trivial and insignificant? So we were going to talk about it. That we determined. But how do you talk about it? I can't wait and concluded, can't talk about 9/11 because it's been said by people far more articulate, far more devastated, far more involved and tragically involved or consumed by the tragedy. But what we could talk about, which no one had, was 9/12. And I believed then, as I do today, that we changed so significantly on 9/12 in so many ways, but not at all in others. So how do we communicate that? And we did it the following way. We do a series of ads, put them all together in an insert that appears in newspapers across the country. They appear separately in magazines. And one ad says, on 9/12, people who hadn't spoken to their parents in years forgot why. And then another one says, on 9/12, taxi drivers waved at each other with all 5 fingers. And then a third one says that on 9/12, 14,000 people still contracted HIV. And how better, kind of basically, to make those 3 points. So the ads run, and first, Mr. Pohartz from the New York Post writes a very difficult editorial about how opportunistic and inappropriate our message was. And then Fox News picks up on it, and CNN picks up on it, and should they, shouldn't they? And I didn't publicly defend it because I didn't feel it was appropriate to do that, and I didn't want to put myself in the middle of that debate.
With so much more to say about so many social issues, more than a few people wonder if Kenneth Cole might someday run for public office.
People have asked me if I would ever consider running for office. My kind of packaged answer is that I consider running from office all the time. You know, I think that as a private person in the private sector, you can do so much more than you can in most cases as a public person. And you don't have the scrutiny, you don't have the oversight, you don't have all the federal and local and regulations. And I can say, do so much. If it's truly public service you want to do, you could do so much as a private person and as a private business person, as a private individual. Another thing too is that I'm frightened that people will construe this to be political, what I do. Because it's not. My issues and my messages are social, and they're personal and they're human. They're not political.
Up next, the lesson learned after 20 years in the fashion business. Beautiful women, stunning clothing, dazzling affairs, that's fashion. But for all its glamour and appeal, fashion also has detractors. The value of fashion, it's an age-old question, and one often turned over by Kenneth Cole.
I deliberate tirelessly all the time. Is fashion important in and of itself, or is it not? I mean, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard at the end of the day? And what is the real intrinsic value? What does it add to people's lives? And then I come away and I make the conclusion that that it's very valuable in the sense that We have an unedited opportunity, every one of us, individually, every morning when we get dressed, to be whoever we want to be. Because most of the people you're going to encounter in your day, you're going to do it at a very superficial level. And they're not really going to get to know you, Judy, or me, or anybody else. And they just know how you present yourself. So you have the opportunity to be who you want to be. You can put your earrings wherever you want, you can tattoos wherever you want them, and skirts can be tight, your ties can be there or they cannot. So it's a very powerful opportunity. And I meet people all the time and say, well, you know, Ken, I'm not really a fashion guy. And I say, well, that's a bigger statement, as much of a statement as any. So not to take advantage of those few moments in the morning and deliberate and think about that process, I think is a lost opportunity. And you're certainly entitled to take that. So in one regard, I think it's important, and it's a powerful opportunity to help define yourself. And on the same token, I continue to remind myself and everybody here that no one needs what we sell. And if every shoe store in America closed its doors this afternoon at 12 o'clock, hardly an American would go barefoot for 17 years. And no one needs this stuff. We got to make you want it. We got to make you feel good about having bought it at the time and then thereafter. And we've made you feel better. And we've added value in our relationship. We've added value in your existence. You wake up in the morning, you think you look good, you're going to, because it becomes a self-fulfilling event. You look in the mirror, you think you look good, you'll smile, you'll relax, you'll be at ease. You think you look terrible, you might as well go out and get hit by a car because your day is doomed.
You wrote your book, Footnotes. It's a look over the last 20 plus years in the business. What made you do it?
I did it because I felt that I needed to kind of get it down, and I needed to not want to have to kind of reflect back anymore, and it was a good opportunity for me to kind of commemorate and benchmark this point in the process, this benchmark in this company's history. You know, historically, fashion businesses don't last this long.
No, they do not, let alone flourish as yours has.
I mean, people said to me over the years, how did you make it work? But even more so, what would you have done if it didn't work? Because when I started the business 20 years ago, by the way, it was actually 21.
I was just about to point that out.
Women do it all the time.
That's right.
Especially in this business. And so people say, what would you have done if it didn't work? And people say, if it didn't work then, because you took a big risk, left the family, put everything you had at stake, and what do you do to make it work today? So that's a big question I get. And the answer that I tell people, the risk of sounding a little pompous, maybe arrogant, first is that at the time, I never ever conceived or considered the possibility that it wouldn't work. I just, in my heart, knew that I'd make it work, but I didn't know what it was. And every day, I go to work and try to figure it out because it changes. And it is unpredictable. And what it was yesterday is not what it is today. So I think that is what's kind of kept me focused.
Have you found what it is?
No, and that's what's so great about this business, because it keeps changing. And the fact that I'm not vested in what it will be tomorrow is what enables us to keep going. And because, you know, we all make these emotional, financial commitments and investments in our futures, and we don't want to let them go. You know, when circumstances change, we just kind of hang on often too long, and there's those people that are reluctant to change, and those that embrace it and thrive from it, and it's the latter that usually succeed in this business.
What about risk taking?
You take risks, and you prepare to jump if need be. And just be prepared and have a parachute, because you just may have to do it, and that's okay, because it's okay. And sometimes making that jump can be as exhilarating as not having been forced to.
Okay, so we know where you've been. Where are you going?
You know, I don't know where I'm going. I tell a cute little story these days, which I heard recently. It's a story of an old man who's driving down the road, and he gets a call from his wife on his cell phone. And she says, honey, get home quick. I just heard that there's a lunatic on the same road you're on, driving in the wrong direction. And he pauses and says, sweetheart, it's worse than that. There are hundreds of them. And for 20 years, I've kind of been that lunatic. And I think that, you know what, we've never really done this in the traditional way. We've kind of gone against traffic more than we haven't. And and I love it. And I'm appreciative every day for the opportunity to do it. And I remind myself that every day when people get dressed, they make a conscious decision on what brands they're going to wear, what clothes they're going to put on, what brands they're going to wear. And it is an extraordinary privilege to be part of that decision. And I acknowledge it, I recognize it, and I hope I can earn it for lots of years to come. And I know I have to. It's not a gift.
After being in the business almost 21 years, what have you learned?
I've learned that I don't know that much. That this business it's a different business every day. And I've also learned that there are no obstacles. The greatest obstacles in life are all internal, because you can accomplish almost anything if you are open to the process and to the journey. I mean, you can get there as long as you're prepared and you're reasonably flexible. And if you love it, you'll do it well. And if you don't, it's going to be hard.
And it's been a great ride in spite of all the lunatics on the road.
It's been an extraordinary, exhilarating journey, and I am very appreciative for the opportunity to be part of it.
Today on Behind the Label, one of the biggest names in the world of fashion, Donna Karan. With a career that has spanned more than 20 years, she's become legendary in the industry. Her sexy, powerful designs brought high fashion to the boardroom. Her client list is overflowing with A-list celebs. And today, the Donna Karan name is all but synonymous with New York and American fashion.
Pharrell Williams here.
Hi, I'm Joy Bryant,
I'm Eric Ripper,
I'm Tom Colicchio.
I'm Dr. Frank Lipman,
the host of On the Table,
the host of Across the Board,
Host of Artist Talk.
Host of Hooked Up.
host of the show Be Well Week, Be Well Weekend on the Reserve Channel.
It's only on Reserve.
Did you know that you can follow my show on social media sites like Facebook?
Follow us on Twitter.
If you're a fan of my show, hit the like button.
All of the above.
Share me with your friends.
Treat yourself. Check out a new episode of my show, Hooked Up.
And if you want to leave comments, feedbacks, ideas, whatever, love to hear from you. Leave a comment.
And if you don't want to miss the show, be sure to subscribe.
The one that's like down here, or is it here? Somewhere down here.
Thanks for watching the Reserve Channel.
Only on YouTube. Throw caution to the wind and ask yourself what rules.